Okay, welcome back to NRS274. This is the third installment of your Module 2 topic on inflammation, immunity, and wound healing. So we're going to take a bit of a look specifically at fever in this section, and maybe wound healing if we get time. So we talked about the inflammatory response, and one of the hallmarks of inflammation was heat. Heat because you're increasing the blood flow, and blood brings with it heat. But there's also another element to heat as well, and that is a more systemic reaction. And that's what we mean when we're talking about fever. So temperature regulation is one of those negative feedback loops that we saw last year. So we have our hypothalamus, which has a control center that sets our temperature at about 37-ish degrees, a little bit below that maybe. And we've got a comfortable range that we can fluctuate in between about 36.2 and 37.7 degrees. So we've got this temperature regulation mechanism that's controlled through balancing heat production and heat loss mechanisms. So heat production, like burning brown fat, all of our chemical reactions are producing heat. Shivering if we're cold, things like that. And then heat loss mechanisms like radiating heat away from the body, sweating, evaporating heat, etc. So think of that negative control system with the receptor, the control center, and the activators, and this is a good example. Now, fever, which we also describe as the febrile response. So if you're having seizures caused by a fever, they are febrile seizures, just as an example of how to use the word. Fever is having a core temperature measured rectally of greater or equal to 38 degrees Celsius. And I believe that's 100 degrees Fahrenheit, although I don't really use the Fahrenheit system, so 38 degrees Celsius. Fever is produced when cells of the immune system act to adjust heat production, conservation, and loss in order to maintain that core temperature at a temporarily higher level that acts as a new balance point. So the chemicals released by our inflammatory response act on the hypothalamus to raise that normal set point for a period of time. So we go from about 37 up a little bit higher to 38 or above. So fever is mediated by cytokines from the inflammatory response triggered by injury or infection. So that's how we get there. And once we reset that hypothalamus to the higher temperature degree setting, we start doing all the things that would produce more heat, burning more brown fats, vasoconstricting in the periphery to try and retain heat until we get the temperature up. But why do we do it? So raising the temperature of the body does a number of things that are really beneficial to us. There are, of course, some dangers, and that's also a consideration. But one of the main reasons is because if we have pathogens like bacteria, they can only survive within a narrow temperature range. Our cells are a little bit more resilient. So it can kill or inhibit the growth of microorganisms directly. Secondly, it decreases our serum levels of iron, zinc, copper, and other elements that those bacteria need in order to reproduce. So if we starve them of all of those elements, they can't replicate. It also prevents viral replication by causing the lysozymes to break down. So virus literally can't package itself up and form itself, which is good. It increases change of lymphocytes into B and T cells and helps our immune system respond. It also increases the ability of neutrophils. The neutrophils are the biggest number of white blood cells in the body. It helps them to move about, so it increases their motility. It allows our phagocytes to be more effective and efficient, so it enhances phagocytosis, so they find it much easier to engulf bacteria and digest them. And it increases the production of the antiviral interferon molecule. So interferon works by, if you've got one virus-infected cell, it will start producing interferon and release it, and it'll warn all the neighboring cells. So they've got receptors for interferon, and they start putting up antiviral defenses. So it's kind of like a warning signal to all your neighboring cells. Oops. So we've got either tissue injury that directly stimulates our immune cells and monocytes, etc., or we've got an infection, including microorganisms, and they're also producing exogenous pyrogens. So a pyrogen is a chemical that stimulates fever, and exogenous means it's from outside the body. So in other words, these pyrogens are coming from the microbes themselves. Both of these trigger our immune response and our inflammatory response. So we get all those monocytes and macrophages arriving at the site of inflammation, releasing chemicals as well. And one of the things, or a family of things that they're releasing, are endogenous pyrogens. So pyrogenic cytokines, again, fever-producing chemicals. These stimulate the hypothalamus, and they cause that raising of the normal temperature set point. So we produce more heat, so we increase muscle tone, increase shivering, mechanisms like that. And we also prevent heat loss. So we vasoconstrict, we might get goosebumps or piloerection, as we call it, to kind of insulate our body. And together all those mechanisms raise the body temperature and we get fever. Oh, I'm going to stop it there. It's only a short one, this one, but just to tell you how we get to fever and what it is. So the next installment will be wound healing.